I can see Rachel.
Ah, I can see a gorgeous cat. Hello. Oh, we're not hearing you yet.
Oh, we can't hear you, Rachel.
Oh, yes, we can. Now?
Can you
Rachel?
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yay.
Hello, Rachel. I'm
Hi.
Alex from Kinnikunnya. How are you going?
I'm so good. Let me just text David and be like, get on here.
It's working. It's working.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I totally botched this. And yeah.
You didn't
Watched how? No.
It's all just beginning.
Day.
It's all good.
I'm
It's
so
so
happy
good.
to be here, and I'm sure David will be here any moment. And obviously, we are not the brightest with time zones.
Well, we're in 3 different ones, I believe, today. So
yes.
I think that's all fair.
Where are you?
We're in Sydney.
I thought you did too.
So yeah. Well, David will be in a different one. I've just heard. So yeah. No, it's exciting times.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah.
Jackie's one of my dearest friends and one of my very favorite people. So it's a great honor to have her doing this with us.
I'm so excited to see you. I just want to be quiet and listen to your voice. I know.
Oh, you're so nice, and you look. You're very. You have like an actual professional background, like you've been doing these. I never had the professional background set up. I'm always like, it's always like mid call. I'm like, oh yeah, I should have done that. Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah.
But yours looks perfectly composed. I can see a flower.
Thank you.
It's perfect. It's better than mine. Mine's just books.
Some
I was about to try and carry this around to show you the jacaranda trees through the window, but.
So here I am. I'm sure David will be, I just texted him, he'll be here any second. But I think we could go in the meantime. I think people are here already, it looks like. Hi everyone, thank you for coming. And thank you for your patience with my stupidity about time zones.
You didn't do anything wrong. You're here now.
No.
You're here at exactly the same time as I got here. You're everything's perfect.
Yay.
So is there a delay? Sorry.
No, go for it.
Delay. Can you hear? Oh, it's impossible for you to know, isn't it? I'm wondering if
it looks to me like as you're saying it, I can hear you saying it.
Good.
So I think it's all good on my end. The only people who it's not good on right now is for my 2 cats who thought they were about to get played with and fed. And now they're sitting and they're lurking in the corners like, hey, it was our time. So that's the only tragedy in all of this.
And so what time is it where you are?
It is 5 o'clock for me in Los Angeles. That will be 8 o'clock for David in New York. I think he had gone to do something at the Strand, something like that.
That's ironic, yes. So,
I don't, anyway. But I would love to talk about Dash and Lily and thank you for hosting us. And again, he'll be here any second, I'm sure.
Well, shall I do a bit of an intro?
That would be great.
Yeah? Okay. So, hi everyone out there whose faces I can't see, but I know you're there. Welcome to you all, and especially welcome to our international guests, one of whom is here, the other is coming. Welcome, Rachel, and to our local star, Jaclyn Moriarty. Today, Kino is hosting this event from Sydney on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from which you're all joining us today, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. In introducing our special guests today, if I was really going to do them justice, it would take most of our Zoom time. So briefly, if you were to line up the books that David and Rachel have written solo, you would easily fill a shelf, with both of them having been published YA authors for nearly 20 years. In addition to those 24 books together, these New York Times bestselling authors have just released their 6th book, Mind the Gap, Dash and Lily, the 3rd book about these smart, funny teens who now also have a fantastic Netflix series, which I'm sure we'll hear more about today and which I finished last night and is awesome. So congratulations. Chatting with them and getting all the juicy gossip today is the wonderful Jaclyn Moriarty. Jaclyn is an award-winning author of books for all ages from adult to middle grade. But she first came to my attention with the Ashbury High books, Finding Cassie Crazy being an all-time personal favorite.
Same.
Yeah, and my last comment before handing over is just a personal one. Several years ago, I happened to be shopping in the Strand. And if you know Dash and Lily, you'll know that that is kind of a key feature of the story. And I managed to find this, which you might be able to see, says Strand signed copy. So not only did it come from the Strand, but it's actually been written in by two very awesome people. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I'm saying nothing more. Jacqueline, Rachel, thank you. It's all over to you.
Thank you so much.
And I'll point out about that book, David also has a remarkable career as an author, as an editor at Scholastic. So he wears many hats and he goes to so many different events. He knows everybody. So it happens so often that when I am asked to sign a book, David has already signed it at some other event. So anytime that there's like both of our signatures, I'm like, wow, it happened. Sometimes if somebody asks me to sign one of our joint books and he hasn't signed it yet, I'll write a note to him like, I got here first. It is so rare that happens.
That's beautiful. Right. Hello, everybody. My name's Jacqueline, and I know David and Rachel very well. I never know when I'm doing this whether I should look at the camera, shouldn't I? That's where I should look. Does that work if I look at the camera?
Marvelous in any
Either way.
Thank you, because I keep wanting to check my hair. It's terrible about Zoom. If this little bit should be coming down. Look, that's I know Rachel and David well. I met Rachel first about 15 years ago when I sent her a fan email because I had loved her book Gingerbread so much. And she wrote back and we became friends that way and have visited each other in Sydney and LA and New York. And Rachel's little sister Anna actually became my little boy's first babysitter because she was in Sydney.
And I also want to say, like, when I got the email from you, that first one, I remember it was such a specific moment for me because I always remember it. I was sitting at the airport in Boston waiting for a flight. I don't remember what I was doing there at the time, but it was so like, oh my God, Jaclyn Moriarty sent me a fan letter because I was such a big fan. So I will always remember that moment, and how kind you were to Anna, who was doing her semester abroad there and who's also one of your biggest fans.
Oh, and she's beautiful. You're both beautiful. And that is a beautiful coincidence that you happen to like my books too. So we had a fantastic connection from that moment, and I adore all of Rachel's books and adore Rachel herself. So I could keep talking about that for the next half an hour. David, I also have got to know very well from all kinds of different directions because I'm published by Scholastic in America, and David is a big guy in Scholastic, and he's also a fellow author who I've met at author events and also through Rachel and other author friends of mine, such as Garth Nix is, I think, published by David. So there's connections everywhere. And I love David's books too, and I love the books that these two write together. Usually David and Rachel are such powerful, important people who I respect so much. So usually they are in charge. But today I am in charge.
I love it.
David sent me an email saying we could do a freeform discussion, and I thought, no, I'm in charge. But maybe we could.
And now look, he's not here. You dared to do
it. But if he was here, I would also be saying I'm in charge. But if I decide it's freeform, then it can become freeform. So I thought we could start by talking about the Netflix series because that's the most, I've just finished it last night and that's what's most on our mind, and then go back through time to when you started co-writing books together and all that, especially the Dash and Lily books, because there's a new Dash and Lily book called Mind the Gap, which I've also just finished. So that's all giddy in my mind. And I'd even like, if we've got time, to go back to the imaginative worlds of your childhoods. I'd love to hear about how you were as an imaginative and creative child, and David too, if he gets here.
I love to do that,
and then you get to. I'm going to
do all the things that I've said. It's one of my joys.
Good, lovely, good. So the Netflix series, I just finished watching. Here they are. That's the tie-in edition. I just finished watching it last night and was amazed because it's so rare that TV series or movies can capture the heart of the book. I often feel like it's that translation issue where sometimes they try to get too literal without realizing, and I think, no, these are different media, and therefore you cannot just take the whole book and put it on the screen, it won't work. Whereas with this one, it felt like I felt like I instantly recognized both Dash and Lily, and the charm and the beautiful, I don't like the word quirky, but in its best sense, the quirkiness of the books and the complexity of the issues, I felt like it captured. So, Rachel, what did you think of the series?
I love it. And, for exactly the same reasons, I often say that, the hardest thing with an adaptation is capturing the tone and spirit, because the things that happen, that's not, technically speaking, it's not that hard to recreate it, but to make it feel like a book feels, that is the single most hard thing to do. And I think adaptations that work are because they did that. It's a frustrating thing because it's not a skill that you can learn. It's like, it's very organic. Either it's there or it's not. It's not something that, like, often, especially with, screenwriting, it's written by committee, or there's so many other voices that are weighing in. So you get really lucky when the tone is right, and they did a beautiful job with that. And I'm so appreciative. And, all the things that they changed which were not that big, but they stayed, this is the most important part to me, is that they stayed true to the essence of the characters and the heart of the story. And that's the most you can ask for. And I think they did a beautiful job at that. And some of the new things are fun too. I mean, they expanded a lot of the characters, which you have to do for a series, and opened up a lot of doors for things where things could go in the future too. So I really love it. And it's only been out for a few days, but it's like all of a sudden gotten so much response. I mean, when you think about a movie like Nick and Nora, which had a lovely audience, but it's so different to have a movie versus a Netflix show. Like, the movie has a very finite time in the theater, a finite time, number of people who will see it in that way. It didn't really have a lot of international distribution, so it got seen. It did well. It was wonderful. But this is like a whole other scale. To see people around the world, and they can all see it instantly, and they don't have to wait, and they can get all the episodes right then. It's really remarkable to see. I mean, it's different even from like being on a network or HBO, where you have to wait every week for a new one, just to have that. It's like all of a sudden.
Exactly.
And the reach of that it's mind-boggling to me, and I'm only at the very beginning of seeing how that's working.
Yeah.
I'm not very much on social media. It's not really my thing, to my own detriment, but just in the last 2 days, I've gotten like 30% more followers.
Wow.
From, it's a lot to see. And it's, like I said, it's very gratifying, and it's still processing it also, but super grateful, and mostly just super grateful that the show is good, because it could have not been,
There's so many things that can go wrong out there for all of those elements to fall into place and for it to work. And then also it seems to be being promoted really well. So I'm hearing a lot about it everywhere. Yes. Does it scare you at all how big it's getting? Do you feel like you're
I don't know that I believe that yet, but I feel certainly, like I said, gratified to see, how much it's being seen, and like all these instant, it's really, just young people are so extraordinary with the way they make these instant fan accounts, and they make these instant, like, their own little supercuts, and their own little fan cuts and stuff like that. And it's so quick. And they're so professional. That's what's amazing too. And that's something that's really, that happens on its own. You can't make that happen, at least on a large scale. Certainly you can hire someone to do it to a certain extent, but when something really takes off, that happens on its own. And I'm seeing a little bit of that, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty special, isn't it? It's magic. And especially the magic of Christmas and this time of the year and all that kind of thing.
Also, I mean, we definitely felt like no matter how the election went, the show would land well. No matter what mood you're in, I think we're all just, you guys are having a much nicer ride than we are in Australia. And it's just been a really crappy time. So just to have this thing to sink into that's just happy and,
exactly.
It's funny, we couldn't have used this word before. I mean, no one would have thought it a year later, but it's nostalgic. You know, it was only so recently shot, but that's the word that keeps being sent back to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
To me. So I think it represents, you know, something that we all remember really nicely, and also something we can aspire to again.
Yeah, that's beautifully put.
It's like a vision of this is there for us, you know.
Yeah,
it's a matter of time.
Yeah. So it could have been either something after that election, either something comforting or something celebratory.
Right.
And, exactly. Yeah, in a way, it has to be both, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you said something about
the scenario, but certainly this one is better.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I'd like to know. I know a little bit of what involvement you've had in the making of it. Can you tell people about your contribution? Because
I wrote one of the episodes, episode 7. And that was really fun to be in the writer's room and to, you know, hear how it all got broken down and transformed to have a more of a bird's eye view of how it all got transformed into a series.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool to see. Like I was watching it the other night with my sister Martha, and I was showing it. There was I kept telling her pause. I wanted to like annotate things, and like there's the scene where Lily makes her own Muppet. I was telling her that when the first day that I was in the writer's room, they kind of each individually pitched the episodes that they were going to write and told me kind of where I came in. They were already pretty far along. And so they kind of each told me what their pitch was for each episode. And I remember the writer telling me that episode, and she was so lovely. And she got to the part where, you know, Lily makes her own Muppet, and then they go to this thing called a break room, and they smash it all to pieces. And my heart kind of fell. And then she said, but Lily, of course, can't do that. And she leaves with the Muppet. And I said, thank God you said that. Because if you told me that Lily did that, I would have known, like, you don't know anything about this character. But now I know you understand this character. You get her heartbeat. We're all good. But it was like at that moment, you know, that I knew like they're doing this with the book right. You know,
exactly.
You know, they're changing. Like that scene happened in a very different way in the book. The heart of it, this kind of what we were talking about, adaptation, is exactly the same. They knew the right instinct was make this thing, but you can't just then destroy it. That's just not who she is.
Exactly. I was also relieved when I watched that episode, because I thought, no, hang on, wait a minute. And the differences, and I'm sure other people do too, that kind of when you love the book, it sounds like you're having less difficulty with the differences than some viewers might have, do you think? Or were there some that you resented?
Resent's not the right word. It's just, another interesting part about being in the writer's room was that a lot of the things that I think I might have resented, I resented less when I heard the reasons why. And a lot of times they had to do with very practical reasons.
Yeah.
You know, like it's impossible to shoot this, that way. It's impossible to get the rights to use this or whatever it is. It's like when you hear the more pragmatic reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to see the actual Collation movie.
Exactly. I want that movie.
Just the posters alone were incredible. I was like, I wish I had asked for to keep one. They were just amazing.
Oh yeah, you should get one, because that's part of what must be extraordinary about it, seeing something that was just words becoming actual objects. And even that Muppet, somebody actually had to sew that and create that. So yeah. Does it make you feel a bit giddy with power?
Totally. I often tell the story that when Nick and Nora was made, the very first day that David and I went to visit on set, and they also filmed in New York City, we came off a very main street and turned up a side street. So until we turned up that side street, we didn't really have any idea of like the scale of things. And all of a sudden we turn up we go up the side street, and there's like these like huge trucks, and there are cranes and like lights coming down from the rooftops. I mean, it's huge endeavor happening. And then we walk a little further, and there's a yellow Yugo sitting on the street, the curb. And I looked at David and I said, I just threw the Yugo into the book to mess with your head. You know, that was someone's job to find that. And even more amazing is, like, I guess David, he tracked it also, that eventually somebody wrote some kind of coffee table book about the Yugo, and that Yugo made it into that book. I guess it retired its Yugo career in film on making, and then made it into a coffee table book.
Yeah,
It's
so many
extraordinary to see.
Unexpected consequences, aren't there?
Yeah, exactly.
One just little decision you made that day. Yeah, so you're powerful, but also there must be some feelings of powerlessness as well, I guess.
Yes, I mean, totally. And, you know, to nitpick up through all of those wouldn't probably be very kind. You know, like I said, in the big scheme of things, it's such a beautiful job. It was such a labor of love, and I was there on set a couple of times. David was there a lot more. I mean, I don't live; it's not as convenient for me, obviously, but I know for everybody in the cast and crew, obviously it was a job. They're professionals. They do it well, but it really did truly feel like a labor of love. Like, people were emotionally invested in this, like this idea of this version of Christmas and this kind of fairy tale, and how, you know, and also like this very romanticized version of New York.
Yeah.
It was really amazing. And one of the other stories I love to tell is the scene where they go to the party at Priya's house. And it was shot in this penthouse apartment on Central Park West. Central Park South, which, for people who don't know New York, it's like one of the poshest addresses in the world. And if you are at the top of that and you're looking out, you literally look over Central Park. It is majestic. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And it turned years ago, I used to do volunteer work for an elderly lady who lived in that building. And even though it's a very posh building, I think there were these old rent stabilized apartments in there also. And she had been moved in with her parents 50 years earlier. She lived in a tiny little studio apartment that was an air shaft, looked out, you know, didn't look out onto anything. It was not posh the way the penthouse was. But anyway, I was so thrilled to be able to go to the same building. And she was a classic New Yorker. And I would just do things for her. It was very minor, but like, you know, grocery shopping and little things like that. And she was such a New Yorker in her attitude, because every time I got there, I'd always say, hi, Lucille, how are you? And she'd always just answer, terrible. But anyway, so fast forward to when they were doing the shoot there, and I went and talked to the doorman. It was the same doorman, and he remembered me and he remembered Lucille, and we had a really nice talk about Lucille, and that was really cool. And at the end, he said, well, what are you doing here for this shoot? And I was like, well, it's kind of based on my book. And he was like, oh, check you out. So there were so many things that happened that were so sweet as a result of this series. But for me personally, I think that was the one.
That's a great connection. Yeah, that is fantastic. And it does feel sometimes like life is all connecting up, do you think?
Yeah.
Everything's falling into place.
Absolutely.
What did you think of check the time so I don't talk too long about this. What do you think of the casting? Because I just thought everybody was cast so well. Everybody felt precisely right. And I was watching it with Charlie, my 14-year-old son, and he hasn't read the books. When I was reading the books, every time Boomer, the character, turns up, I think, oh, I like him. I would think, oh, I like him. And as soon as Boomer turned up on the show, Charlie said almost immediately, oh, I like him.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like this is falling perfectly into place. And also his other favorite character was Mrs. Basil E., who was beautifully done. So did you have any contribution to casting?
Nope.
No, you didn't get to say I don't like them or I do like them?
No.
Wait, did you meet
them? I do love them all. They were all fantastic.
Good.
And you know, I think they were all excellent. And I'm singling out Midori mostly just because, you know, Lily is obviously the character the closest to my heart, and she is, you know, my creation initially, at least. And so I say she's a dream come true. You know, she did it beautifully. And yeah, I mean, and also her dance, the scene where she has the dance through the klezmer music. And I wasn't there that day, but everyone kept writing who was there on set was like, did you see this? Did you see this? And so I knew there was a lot of buzz before it even before I even saw it. But when I saw it, I was like, this is just majesty.
Yeah, I think so too. She was brilliant in that scene. She's gorgeous, isn't she? And
Yeah.
so will there be more seasons? Do you know?
Here's hoping. I mean, Netflix is you know, they do everything based on numbers and you know, algorithms and all of that. So and still probably too premature to say, but certainly we're hopeful that there will be. And who knows, also just with, you know, the pandemic and production, and there's so many other additional complications. But I would just say we're certainly hopeful there will be.
Yeah, good. I'm
And there's
hopeful
not
too.
material. There's 2 other books.
Exactly. I know the material is right here waiting, and people will be desperate to see it, I think. And that we should talk about the other books. So it started with Dash and Lily's Book of Dares, and then to the 12 Days of Dash and Lily, and now you've got Mind the Gap, in which they end up in London. How did that happen? How did you? And it's wonderful. I adored it because it's them again, but you've done a beautiful job of having them. They've progressed a little bit. It's still them in their hearts, but they are a little bit older and a little bit more thoughtful and complex, and the world has got bigger for them. So
I the first couple of books as being like their typical YA books in the sense that the characters are figuring out who they are. And Mind the Gap is very much about that age when you figured that out, and now you have to figure out what you're going to do with that information.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And sort through that. And it you know, we never intended even to write a second book. It was just more, it really became more about the love of the books. And we just loved these characters, and that inspired going back to it. Mind the Gap in particular, we were on tour for the second book, and I just remember there was a point at which in England, and we were signing books, and one of the readers asked, do you think you would write a third book and put it in England? And just very offhand, David said, yes, we'll call it Keep Calm, Dash and Lily. And I went, I actually like that idea. And we sat on it for a while. And then when the show got put in greenlit into production, then it was like, okay, it seems like it's time to pursue that idea. And it was fun to go to London and just take it somewhere different. And also, like I said, just kind of show them in a different part of adulthood, you know, and sorting through those issues in a different way, and in a place where they're not in their natural comfort zone.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly what happens in it. And you bring London to life in just the way you bring New York to life in the other books. So did you go to London I mean, I know you were there when you did the book tour, but did you go again as make it an excuse for research?
The sad thing is, because we wrote it very quickly, and because we between the time when we got greenlit versus knowing that we had to have a book out less than a year later, there wasn't a lot of time. And so anyway, we wrote the book, and I did most of it from memory and the internet, but I did book a trip to go to London so that I could have that for when we revised. So I thought, okay, well, we'll just get the first draft done, and then I'll go and just kind of feel it for myself. And I had high tea booked at Claridge's, which is a key place in the book. I was so excited. And that was the same week that the world closed down.
Oh.
So I ended up not going, and it's sort of my pet dream is that when the world opens up a little bit more and gets better, like that's, besides coming back to see you in Sydney, it's going to London and see my sister, and go to high tea at Claridge's.
Yeah, of course. That's a perfect thing to look forward to. That can be the hope. And the other hope is you coming back to see me, or I'll come to see you.
Exactly.
So how have you been as a creative person? I know I keep hearing how people are coping with the anxiety, and there's a much heightened anxiety in your country than we have anxiety here, the pandemic and the world and everything. How do you cope creatively? How have you coped in this
It's
time?
hard. I mean, honestly, it's day to day. I was just saying to a friend who's on deadline right now, it's like, I just feel like between the pandemic and the election that writers really shouldn't be asked to write right now, but they should still be paid and their projects should still move forward. That's fair, right?
Yeah.
So the answer is that it feels like for all the time that I have, because I am relatively isolated, I really don't go out. I go for a hike in the morning, I pick up a coffee, and if I need anything from the store, I pick it up. But other than that, that's it. That's it. And so you would think that when you have all this time available, you would be so productive. I have not done yoga. I have a whole room dedicated to yoga. I'm not going to embarrass myself, but I almost want to put the camera in the room so you could see I have every prop. I have posters up of every single thing that I could do. There is no reason for me not to be in there. Can't do it. Too distracted. It's just like there's so much anxious energy. So I have learned for myself, and I think everybody's different. So what I say about how I deal with it is not necessarily the way other people what their answer will be, is that it's just kind of go day to day and try to get done what I have gotten things done, but relative to how much time I have. I mean, I've been very grateful. I have had like an actual job that I had to fulfill. So I feel like if I hadn't had something like that, I don't know what I could have gotten done other than just even more anxiety about I don't have a job or something like that. So it's been a really nice distraction. And quite honestly, sometimes I wish it took up more time. But yeah, it's just sort of day to day and recognizing that this is just the way it is, and trying not to beat myself up too much about it.
You definitely should.
I am getting stuff done, just not nearly on the scale or volume that I feel like I should be.
Yeah. Oh, no, but you shouldn't be. I think you're right not to beat yourself up about it at all. Be very kind to yourself.
We're all thinking about the world so much differently. And as writers, like that is the nature of our job. And when all of that stuff is shifting, it takes a while to process it and know how you want that to be reflected in your writing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's going to take a long time. I mean, one of the things I've thought a lot about, because I worked on a project that was about the silent movie era of the early 1920s. And if you look at the pop culture from then, I'm not like I know that much about it, but at least like the silent movies and the books, there's really very little you see about the 1918 pandemic, which was worse than this. And people want to forget it. We're like living through it now. Yeah. We don't want to, I get that now, because I know there's been a lot of thought, like, if there's a season 2 of Dash and Lily, do we address it and things like that? And then I'm hearing this on a lot of shows, unless it's a specific, kind of medical show, like a Grey's Anatomy, so many people just feel like, no. And I was talking to like my hairdresser the other day, who's like, I don't want to watch shows about this. I'm living in it. I don't want to read about it. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah. No, I'm learning French on an app on my phone, and they just put in they've updated it, and they put in little stories where the children can't go out because they're going to get sick. And I thought, no, my learning French is my time. Get away from that. You don't need to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm envious of all my friends' posts from Australia where you guys are like out and about in the world, and it seems pretty romantic and amazing to me. This like very simple thing, but it's congratulations on your sanity. As a collective.
I'm sorry though, and thank you.
Well done.
And I had exactly the same experience where I thought, I've got all this time in lockdown, I'm going to get so much writing done, and I got nothing done. And now that things have opened up and I'm seeing friends more often, suddenly I'm more stimulated and I've got more confined space in which to write. I'm writing so much more. And yeah, like you say, the anxiety calms down. I don't know how much time we have. I want to keep, because we want to make sure we answer people's questions. But can I ask about your co-writing the books and how it started and how the process works? I know a little bit about it and I'm so interested in it.
Well, it all started kind of randomly. I was very early in my career. My first book had come out and David had been introduced to me as an editor and somebody I might like to work with as an editor. At the time, he was doing the Babysitters Club book. So I think, you know, I was sent to him as somebody who potentially could ghostwrite one of those books, and which was not a good idea, like for me, like anyway, so we didn't have anything, none of that ever worked out, but we did develop a friendship. And his first book came out a year after mine. So we would start having lunch and just having them as author rather than author editor. And at one of these lunches, I said kind of randomly, I have this idea for a book about two teenagers called Nick and Nora who would just kind of run around New York City in the middle of the night. And I think it was during the time that the show 24 was on. So I think my idea was to kind of riff off of that and be just 24 hours or something like that. Anyway, I didn't really think much of it. And Dave was like, yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, I'm into it. And I pretty much forgot about it. And like 3 months later, he just sent me a chapter out of the blue. And it was so good. And I had to literally stop everything I was doing to answer it. And it just sort of took off in that way. And what happened on the first book, and it wasn't really intended, it's just the way that it worked for us, was that he would write a chapter and I would pick it up with the next chapter and just build on what he had done. But we never really talked about it or discussed it. We just kind of let things happen. And that is sort of the way we've stuck with it. It seemed to us that worked. And I don't know that would work for every set of collaborators, but we definitely understood that like the spontaneity that you feel and the chemistry that you feel, a lot of it comes from that. And so that's just one of those things that we don't, it's like, it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And it's fun too. You know, I often say the hardest part about working with him is also the best part. And that's like, I send him a chapter and I've planted all these nuggets, but I don't know where they're going to go. And here's David.
David.
Hello there.
Hey.
I hope everybody was told that I was told that it started 20 minutes from now.
Oh.
No, we've been talking really badly about you for the last hour. So you're going to.
Okay.
It's a time difference thing. But it's funny because it feels like I started by saying I want to be in charge, and that you had suggested how it should run, and I decide how it run, and then you win by not actually being here at all. So you are the one with power.
Nope, I just thought it started at 9 o'clock, but that's okay.
No, I'm only
I thought the
We're
same
here
thing.
now. I hope you guys have had a great conversation.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful, and it's wonderful to see your face too.
No, it's
Thank
great
you
to
so much
see you.
for joining us.
Yeah,
We were just hearing from now. What should we do? I want to ask you all the questions too. I'll ask you really quickly. What do you think of the series?
I love it. Absolutely love it. Completely love it. It's almost unhealthy how much I love it.
Good. And you visited the set more than Rachel?
Yes, because they were nice enough to film in New York. I mean, that's why Rachel keeps telling me we should write LA books, but I'm like, no, we're sticking with New York books. Yeah, they could not get rid of me. I was the mascot. I would just, after work, I would go and like hang out whenever possible, even if it meant freezing my feet off, even if it meant having no sleep and going to work the next day. I did it.
Fantastic.
I was telling the story the other day that he sent me, one of the nights that I was there was one of the nights they were shooting at the Strand, and there's so much downtime in the middle of all of that, and it's all through the middle of the night. So they sell an incredible amount of Strand merchandise. So we were just eyeballing all of that and talking about that. And at one point he said, like, who comes to the Strand to get socks? Because they had a whole sock section. And like a month later, he texted me because they were shooting in Union Square when it was bitterly cold. And that's across the street from the Strand. And he texted me and he goes, turns out I needed to go to the Strand for socks.
Yeah.
That's great. So does that mean you became friends? You got to know the actors? Because we were talking quite a bit about how much we love how perfectly it seems to have been cast. So
I mean, it was very fun. I mean, Rachel and I had the same experience on Nick and Nora. It's very funny that like we're default the adults because every cast member is pretty much a teenager or in their young 20s. And so that was kind of fun to just like get to hang out with the cool kids. But they were wonderful. I mean, like I had some great conversations with Austin about Dash, and Midori was just so wonderful. And just like, it was it was like summer camp on the set. I mean, it felt like everybody was just having such a great time, and it felt so special. So that it was nice to be a part of that.
I think that must have, sorry.
That one, I was, again, not there very often, but one of the ways in which it affected the third book, The Mind the Gap, was that the night that I was there at the Strand, the guy who plays Mark, who is Lily's cousin who works at the Strand, who is a much loved theater actor in New York. And he didn't really have a lot of lines, but he was so funny every time that we wrote the third book. I was like, Mark needs more time.
That was going to be one of my questions. Has it changed the way you write now, the book, because you are seeing it in a more visual way? Or are you trying to think how will the production work on this scene?
Do you want to start, or should I? Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that Dash and Lily started in part because after Nick and Nora, we toured for Nick and Nora, and after the movie, people kept asking, oh, well, what can you do in a movie that you can't do in a book? And I kept saying slapstick comedy. You can't do slapstick comedy in a book. It doesn't work. You have to have the visuals for that. And then, of course, when we sat down to write Dash and Lily, I was like, you know what? Let's try to do slapstick comedy in a book. And some of my favorite scenes in Dash and Lily are slapstick comedy. And lo and behold, they ended up as slapstick comedy in the series. So that was pretty cool. And then for Dash and Lily specifically, I mean, I would love to say that no, I kept a wall up and I was not picturing the actors at all when we were writing this third book. But literally, there were times when I would be on the set writing the book with the characters in the same room, and you can't help but internalize that.
Exactly.
And again, the actors were so perfect. It's sort of, who can say for sure? Was I writing the actors, or was it that the actors were so perfectly embodying my writing that I was just seeing the writing reflected back at me? So it sort of all became the same thing, which was really fun.
Yeah. And I was asking Rachel just before you turned up about how your writing process and how you never talk about it. You just pass it back and forth between you. And I was wondering, how much is that like
a book of dares?
how much is that like a dance between you, and how much is that like a chess game? I don't know if you've seen The Queen's Gambit, but I've been watching that, so chess is on my mind. So every time I think about you two writing like that, I think are you visualizing several moves ahead and wondering what the other person is going to do? Is one of you leading more than the other, or does it go back and forth? Or
I'll start, and I think in our heads we wish it was a chess game. There's a lot more credit than we actually deserve. It's really fly by the seat of our pants, if you know whatever that expression is. But yeah. Thank you.
I was gonna say it's a chess game with two players who are only thinking about the next move. That's what it is.
Strictly rookies.
Strictly what is the next move? I mean, I do think at this point, I mean, what's so fun about it is, and again, I'll speak for both of us, but Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we've now done it so much with each other that we can absolutely anticipate what the other person is going to react to and not react to, and can sort of see which way they want it to go, and maybe go that way, maybe go against the grain. And so that becomes part of the fun of it, is sort of, again, I guess it is the chess move and that anticipating the next move. And then usually we try to thwart each other more than we try to help each other out. But because I mean, in all of our books, there has to be tension between the characters, and there has to be tension between the voices. If they were all agreeing about everything, it would be a really boring book, and not much would happen. So I think we can anticipate sort of through our characters how it's going to move, and how we can frustrate each other, and how the characters can frustrate each other. But that's what makes both good comedy and also very honest writing about relationships.
Yeah. And do you think it works? So the two of you work so well because you come from different perspectives in a way. I was thinking both of you have been such good friends to me at dark times in my life. Rachel by sending me the best chocolates possible, and David by sending music compilations. So in a way, that is like a Lily and Dash situation that you might be. Do you think and people must ask you all the time, but how much are you both Dash and Lily? Rachel, are you like Lily, or are you a little bit like Dash? Are you a combination of both?
Of all of them that are in us, but they're also their own creations.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I mean, like it's interesting how the things that happen in your life can affect the way that the characters come out. Like for Lily, I always remember that we started writing it in January, and that was right after Christmas, obviously. So David wrote the first chapter. He said it at Christmas, but there were a couple of things happening in the background. I remember when I wrote her first chapter, first of all, it was, I think, the same day that Obama got inaugurated, that I started writing. I remember very specifically, and just this feeling of hope. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that came through in Lily. The other thing that had happened is I had just adopted 2 kittens who are now 12. But like Lily got a little bit pet obsessed in it. And then the other thing is that we were just coming up, I think it was the 2-year anniversary of my grandfather's death. And he was very much on my mind. Mm-hmm. So that was how Grandpa and came in there. So
I love Grandpa.
Like, how are they like me? And more, I personally, I think about what were the things happening in my life that affected how those characters came out the way I wrote it. What about you, David?
Yeah, no, I think that is true. I mean, I think that Dash in book 3 is probably more like me than Dash in book 1. Like, I think it's sort of,
yeah,
they are both as characters evolving, which is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. Again, I've never written 3 books with whatever covering different periods of time in characters' lives before. So it's just fascinating to see where they go. And sometimes it's always surprising. I mean, I feel that's the way, truth, and Jackie, I'm sure it's the same way with you, that you think at first that your characters aren't like you, and then you write a sentence, you write something about them, and you're like, oh, they're more similar to me than I thought. Like, like we're always in denial at the start, but then it rises to the surface.
Yeah, no, I'm always offended at first. I always say, of course it's not me. I have an imagination. I make it up. But yeah, no. I'm not sure how much time we have left. I did want to get to your writing, and I need to take questions, don't I? But I also wanted to get to your writing processes yourselves. You talk about...
Sorry, Jackie, we can go a little bit longer if everybody's okay to do that. It's up to you guys. So...
I'm okay.
Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
It's entirely up to you guys.
I don't want to keep you too long, though. And I don't want to miss out on questions from the audience, but I have about 100 more questions I want to ask you. So I try to make decisions. Longer, Jake says, longer. But I don't want to keep you for too long.
I didn't think I was going to be here for another 10 minutes, so I have the next hour blocked out. So really, I can stay for as long as you'd like me to.
Do you have, whenever I'm writing, I always have to have this cup with me, this, and I also have to have this, this bowl, or this one, and this one is only allowed because it was made by the same person. So I was wondering if you two have superstitions or procedures related to your writing, or are you more free-flowing?
So many superstitions, because honestly, I'm the world's worst procrastinator, and I will use any excuse not to write. So if I add superstitions into them also, I'll never write. It'll just be literally, I'm surrounded by bowls in a room. Frozen.
Do you have rules about writing? Are there places that you write best?
Honestly, the quarantine has changed a lot for me. I mean, if anything, the one thing that the biggest benefit for me is I've gotten so much better about writing at home. I used to be terrible about it because I'm so distractible, and I love to clean, and I'll do anything not to write. And now there's nothing else to do. I've cleaned everything. There's nowhere to go. So, I mean, if anything, for me, that has gotten a lot better.
Yeah. How about you, David?
Yeah, I wish I really don't have any superstitions. I wish I did. Like I'm like, is there something I wear? Is there something I do? But it's really not. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I have 2 shirts that are like the writing shirts, but it's more like the shirts that I know that I would never ever wear outside my apartment. So it's like it's almost a way of getting myself to stay in the apartment to get the writing done if I am wearing the shirts. And like they date back to, one of them at least dates back to high school. I mean, like it's a pretty ratty shirt. So I think that is the closest that I come. But again, it's more strategic than it is sentimental, probably.
Yeah.
And then bizarrely, I do have an answer though to my ideal scenario. I have found that I work best at other people's dining room tables, preferably with another writer at the table also writing.
Yeah.
Like it's that balance of, I don't write well in public because I'm too easily distracted by what's going on around me. So if you're at somebody else's dining room table, there's no general public around you. But if you're in somebody else's apartment, you're not stopping to go to the refrigerator every 5 minutes. You're not stopping to clean. You're not stopping to do any of the other things that you do in your own apartment, or I do in my own apartment. So that is my ideal. And again, most of my writing gets done over the summer. I rent a house with some friends and we all just sort of hunker down and write. And that's always the most productive for that reason. It's not, the distractions of home aren't there, but there is that sort of air of like, I'm going to get some writing done today and everybody else is going to hold me to it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't tell you how many times I've been at panels with him, and like I'm, like I said, the worst procrastinator, but he also has another really big job on the side. He also is much more active in terms of like socializing and going to see music and things like that than I ever am. So it's always amazing to me when people say to him like, well, what's your process to write? And he always just says, I just sit down and write.
In that voice, I actually use that exact voice.
But I know a lot of that has to do, I know he hates when I do the voice, but a lot of that comes from, he has so many more demands on his time than I do. So he's much more disciplined than I am. I admire that a lot. I wish I could be, I just sit down and write. I'll say it, no, I just sit down and write.
But Rachel, you must have extraordinary discipline, because I was thinking about how you first started writing, because you can do it because you were working when you first wrote your first books, weren't you?
Yeah. And you too. I mean, you actually had like a real career. I was just doing whatever I could to get by. Jackie's also a very accomplished lawyer, everybody. And it's a skill I admire very, very much. Yes, I was very driven at that time, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot lazier.
Oh, so have I. Yes, I'm very, compared to what a good girl I used to be. So
she was so driven and motivated. What happened to her?
I did want to take you back to your childhood and talk about what kind of imaginative world you had back then. Do you remember much about how creative you were as children, and were you writing then, or did you have vivid imaginative worlds? Who wants to start?
I'll start it if you want, David. I'll say, I mean, even though I do have two sisters, they're my half sisters and they're much younger than me. Can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just getting an unstable connection. So I was raised as an only child, even though I have two sisters, I wasn't raised with them, and they're much younger than me. So I was also a latchkey kid. So I was alone a lot. I didn't have siblings. I had a working parent. My parents were divorced. And I think a lot of the ways in which I became a writer came from that, is that, I mean, my imagination was my companion. So I definitely think like that definitely formed me as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
David?
The irony here is that like this is like my first night not in my childhood home in like weeks, and like were I in my childhood home, I would like have like show and tell. I'd be able to like be like, and here's this story and here's this. So yes, we've saved everything, so I have them. I definitely was a story writer. I mean, again, I remember writing. I always tell the story in third grade, writing a story which was a chase scene, because all I wrote in third grade was chase scenes, but I said that a character scampered across the hotel lobby, and I was so proud of that word. Now, granted, in retrospect, people don't scamper, squirrels scamper, but that didn't matter. But I just remember that pride in that word, and like looking back now, I'm like, oh yeah, I was a writer. And I would also, it's interesting, and this was something that I talked about a lot with our friend Ned Vicini, because it became part of one of his books. It's kind of a funny story because I obsessively made maps. Like I would be in class with my different colored markers, and I would make maps of fantastical worlds. Like I would just draw the shape of an island, and then I would just start putting in the roads, I'd put in the trees, I'd put in where the different houses and stores were, and I loved doing that. And it's interesting because that's not really the kind of fiction writer I am, but I would just do that over and over again, and I just loved being able to map things out that weren't there, and I could make them be there. And so I think that's definitely a part of it too. And again, what's fun is that in cleaning up some of my papers from like the attic, like I did find some of these maps that I drew, and I was like, oh yeah, no, it really happened. Like it wasn't just my imagination, or I did it once and I've remembered that one time. No, I did it a lot.
Yeah, because do you tell anecdotes in these situations, and sometimes you have a feeling like, am I making that up? Did that really happen, or exaggerating that? Well, I should check if there are questions from there, because I still want to ask you 1,000 things, but I need to, can we ask questions to the authors? Yes, you can. Can the people who are here ask questions?
I don't think so. So only through the chat or through Q&A. Yeah.
I don't think you, did you always know the trajectory of Dash and Lily's story, or did anything major change along the way?
That's a really good question. And I mean, again, we're so spontaneous with it. So, I mean, I think we have an idea of its framework, but we've learned from experience not to get emotionally attached to any ending, because whatever you think you set up, the other person undoes or moves it in a different direction in the next chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think, certainly in the first book, we had no idea where it was going or what was going to happen. I mean, and even there was a certain point where Rachel and I very rarely talk about the book as we're writing, but there was one point where I was like, I think we're writing towards different endings. And we sort of talked it out in the vaguest of terms. Like we didn't mention what the endings would be or what the possibilities were, but I thought we were writing to different endings. Rachel had the last chapter because I had the first chapter. So it was like, okay, well, Rachel will in fact have the ending. And so I sort of knew what I thought Rachel's ending was going to be, but I wasn't feeling it at that moment in the book. And Rachel said with the wisest advice, which I've actually used with other authors numerous times, which was she laid down the gauntlet and just said, well, what could happen in the story that would make you tilt towards my ending or make you believe that it's the right ending? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting challenge. And I came up with a scene where I was like, okay, now I feel this is where we're going. And the ending is the ending it was, and it is the right ending for the book. So that, again, just shows that even 2/3 of the way through the books, we might not know where we're going with it, but we just have to sort of play it out as it goes along.
It would have been a very different Netflix show.
What?
It would have been a very different Netflix show, very different tone.
Although, ironically, the scene that I wrote to convince myself of the ending is one of the few scenes that is not in the TV show. For reasons that I completely understand, and if I were making the TV show, I would not have put that scene in, so I get it. But I think what's interesting is we did not think there'd be a sequel. I mean, we just as we ended Nick and Nora and Naomi and Eli, we ended Dash and Lily, and like, okay, we've taken them where we need to go. And it's we're very happy with the ending of the first book, and it didn't seem like there was going to be another. But then when we were driving in LA and we were talking, and I can't remember which one, the great thing about us is I can't remember which one of us said one thing and which said the other, but one of us said, you know what, I would never write a sequel to Nick and Nora. And then the other one was like, but I would to Dash and Lily. And we realized that both of us felt like, oh, this actually could go on. And we were very conscious
I don't think you said it first either, but I remember being so happy afterward, like, me too.
Right, yeah. It was just one of these things that had occurred to us separately. but it never would have occurred to us had we not been, I think, in the same physical space to even have the conversation. But it was just like, huh. And I think the fact that we had heard from so many people who, like, it's their Christmas tradition to read the book every year for the holidays. So it was obvious to us that, well, of course, I think I was like, they weren't seniors in high school, were they? And Rachel was like, no, they were sophomores. We have 2 more years. I was like, yes, we're good.
I'd like to point out though how not bright I am, because once we had established that we both wanted to write this, I'm so stupid that I was like, so what is it next? Is it like George Washington's birthday? You know, because we ended it at Christmas. I was like, where do we pick it up? You know, what's the next holiday? And the next holiday is President's Day. And David was like, no, the following Christmas. That makes so much more sense. But it was not obvious to me.
That means it's always going to be winter unless you come to the Southern Hemisphere.
Exactly.
Somebody has just asked, do you think there will be a 4th book? That's what's on my mind too. Do you think there'll be
Never seen that. We've definitely been inspired by, you know, taking them around the world and where can we get trips out of this?
Yeah, I certainly the ending of the 3rd book definitely could lead to a 4th book. We did not wrap things up and say this is a trilogy.
Yeah.
Because again, I do think it's really fun to come back to the characters every year and see where they're at. And again, I would love to do another one.
Good. I'm very happy to hear that, because I wanted more. When I finished Mind the Gap, I thought, now I want them. Yeah, I won't give away the ending, but I want to see what comes next. Someone named Beatrice has asked, any advice to share for those who are trying to get a first novel published? Do you think it's better to self-publish or try to find an agent?
You're the pro. You want to tackle that one first?
Sure.
Right.
I mean, again, the first thing I always say when asked this question is, do not put yourself under the pressure to be published. Put yourself under the pressure to finish something that you're proud of and that you want to share with other people. I think a lot of people, especially young writers, and Beatrice, I do not know if you're a young writer or an older writer, but a lot of people put the pressure on themselves that their first book has to be something that is publishable and will hit the bestseller lists and will be a success. And I actually don't know this answer for you, Rachel, but I wrote 3 books before I wrote my first novel. Nobody will ever read those books, but I needed my starter novels to sort of understand how to write a full beginning, middle, and end. And then once I had done it a couple of times, then I actually got better at it.
Yeah, same. I wrote 3 unpublished novels before my 4th was published.
Oh, you are connected in that way, aren't you?
And so that is the preface. But I would say once you have something that you have shared it with your friends, you're ready to put it out in the world. I do think that if you do want it to be in bookstores and you do want it to be sold, I do think that having an agent and going through a publisher is the right way to go. I think an agent is essential because there are all these rights. Like, for example, if your book gets sold to Netflix, you want somebody who's a professional to be able to do those deals for you. If you want it sold in foreign countries, the agent will be able to do that. The agent will sort of have your back and will be able to have the expertise, hopefully from years of practice, that you as an amateur and as a writer won't have. I mean, again, look at me. My day job is in publishing. I am a publisher and I've worked in 25 years in publishing. I still very much need an agent because, again, they know how to navigate things that even somebody as well versed in it as I am, I just don't know how to do, and it is good to have somebody else to do it. So I would say definitely do that. This is not a diss on self-publishing. I certainly think that is a legitimate way to get your book out there so other people can read it. But I do think that if you want to have all of the other things that could come with having a book out, I think having an agent and doing it through a publisher and having rights agents and things like that is the way to do it.
And do you agree with that, Rachel?
I do, but I also want to say, add on to self-publishing. I agree 100% with everything David said, but it's hard to get an agent. It's hard to get a publisher, and if you feel like you've hit a wall, and you feel like your book is as good as it can be and it's ready, self-publish it. Why not? I mean, it's a beautiful thing that you, just because if you hit those walls, it doesn't mean that you've lost all your power. You still have the power to make things happen. And it's a very democratizing thing about publishing now with self-publishing, that you can do that. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And you can build your own following. And also for a lot of people, they self-publish first as a path to, traditional publishing, because they weren't able to break through those walls for whatever reason. So I think it's a nice beacon of hope also. And it is very empowering. Although, like I said, again, I agree with David that, traditional publishing is a better way to go with an agent if you can.
Yeah, one of the best-selling authors in Australia started by self-publishing. That's the unlikely. It's rare, but it does give hope. I think he started with self-publishing, and a publisher happened to pick up that book in the bookshop. That's Matthew Riley, and she contacted him. So that's the dream. So it can come true. I found some new questions in the chat, not just in there. So where's it gone? How different was the experience of episode 7 versus that portion of the book?
Episode 7 is the one that I wrote. And it's the penultimate episode. And in screenwriting terms, it's the all is lost episode, where everything kind of has to fall apart so that you can fix it and put it all back together for your happy ending at the end. And I mean, one of the main differences is that it was, episode 7 of 8, whereas that particular part of the book, I think, happened earlier on. So it was more about resetting. It was very fun to be able to write the McSorley scene and drunk Lily. I felt very happy about that. I mean, a lot of the ways in which it played out are different from the book, and it was fun to kind of play in that wheelhouse. One of my favorite stories to tell is that, I mean, again, I'm a relatively new screenwriter. And there was the scene that you see on the show where Lily is in the taxi cab and she's drunk, and she says something about Sophia, something to the effect of, she's stupidly amazing and unfairly gorgeous. And there's a third thing, I can't remember what it is, but I remember when I wrote it, I thought, this is a mouthful, and maybe I should change it. And it stayed as is, but I definitely had that instinct. And then when they were going to shoot it, Midori texted me about it. I wasn't there on set, I was in LA. She was confused about it, and she said it was like all these contradictory things. And the dialogue was, and I remember thinking, like, I should have listened to my instinct. Like, I was right, it was too much of a mouthful, I should have changed it. And so I was very surprised when I saw the actual show, because I thought they would have changed it when they shot it. And she said it exactly the way I wrote it, and she nailed it. And it was very satisfying, because I really thought, like, oh, I went from like, oh, I should have done it, changed it, to, oh, it really was terrible. And then when I saw it, I was like, actually, it was really good. It was the full spectrum of learning experience for me.
Yeah, I love that line. I remember that line well, and it does work. So I think you should always trust exactly who you are. You are a genius from the beginning.
7 was that lesson. It was not something that happened in the book, but it was my favorite learning experience as a screenwriter.
Mm-hmm. Jana says, I would like to know what David's ending was. Oh, yeah, earlier when you were talking about Rachel was heading in one direction and David was heading in the other.
We reached a certain crossroads where it was clear that I thought of it as a romance and he did not. And he thank you. I see Jackie's face. And so that was really our discussion of that was the gist of it.
So David, do you accept that Rachel is generally right about everything now that we established that?
Of course. I mean, I want to point out that the question was, what was David's ending? And Rachel answered, which I just thought was brilliant. That is how we do it. I have nothing more to add. No, I mean, and to be clear, it really was, it's not like there was an ending in my head that I was writing towards. It was more, I'm not feeling that necessarily Dash and Lily should end up together. I just don't see how, what they would actually see in each other. And again, we certainly solved that one pretty well.
Yeah.
But
And
yes,
I will say also,
right.
I'm sorry. When I got the chapter where he resolved that for himself, and it was the chapter where the tossing of the baby from the stroller, I loved that chapter I loved it so much anyway, but I loved it even more to see the way he was making it all work in his head. Like, I appreciated that so much. And it also, it just made me laugh. I mean, I'm sorry it didn't make it onto the show. For obvious reasons, it was going to be difficult to shoot.
It's so hard to throw a baby in the air.
It was also one of my favorite moments with him as a collaborator, just to see like how he kind of worked through it and made it work for himself and to the better, it made the book so much better.
Yeah. I will say though, I mean, like, it's very clear from our Strand event and tonight, Jake is really lobbying hard for the stage musical. And let me tell you, if there is a stage musical, there is going to be a flying baby in the stage musical. I'm like putting that in the contract. Like, we need the big musical number where maybe multiple babies flying in the air. I mean, it's a musical. You can add emphasis.
Yeah. Actually, that's going to be called Dash and Lily's Flying Baby.
That was the scene I did want to see in the TV series. People will be sad about that. Let me make sure I'm not missing. Well, that one's there. That's David. I'm trying to break into publishing. Any suggestions on how to go about that now? Oh, especially in the era of COVID. Yeah, that's a tricky one. Also, hi, Rachel.
Right now, it's extremely tricky right now. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, because usually the answer is that most major publishers and most indie publishers have internship programs, and that I started at Scholastic as an intern. Many of my colleagues started at Scholastic as an intern. Others started other places interns and then came here. That is the best way to get in the door. And you don't have to necessarily intern just for a publisher. A lot of agencies and literary agencies have interns. And a lot of magazines and newspapers have interns. So that's usually the way in, but unfortunately, at least in the States, that in order to have an internship, you need to come into the office, and that just isn't viable right now. And so that door is temporarily closed. I mean, it will open very widely to a very diverse group of people when we return to normal. But right now we're just all sort of frozen in place, as it were. I mean, that because nobody's really leaving, there aren't many job openings. And so we're just waiting for things to turn over, which is unfortunately the honest answer. But again, once we get back to normal, again, we are always needing people in all of our departments, not just editorial, and the internship program truly is the way in the door.
And I can bookend this by saying that if you read the third book of Mind the Gap, Dash and Lily, a lot of this path becomes clear through Dash's character.
Exactly. I know I didn't want to give away. I didn't know whether I could say that. Yes.
Book 3.
Yeah, the answer is here.
Yes, exactly. There is, yes.
Exactly. Now I'm worried that I'm missing questions, because there's questions in. Do you guys really prefer Veselka to B&H Deli?
Personally, yes. I'm all about the borscht.
And I'm awful. I don't even, B&H to me is a camera store. I don't even know there was a B&H Deli. So, yeah, okay. I mean, it's horrible right now, because like, I do keep sort of, whenever I'm in the city, I make sure I pass Veselka just to make sure it's there still, because there's so many of my favorite places that are either temporarily or permanently closed. Yeah. But I do think, like the Strand, I think Veselka will see this through. And so yeah, so that's where I'm gonna put my pierogi money, is on Veselka.
Jenna says, how do you balance your friendship with your business relationship? Do you ever clash over the work? And if so, how do you work through that? I was going to do a lot of talk about how the clashing, that when things go wrong, when you get angry with each other, I was going to ask a lot about that. So that's good that Jenna asked it too. Because I did think in Sam and Ilse, I think Sam and Ilse is the one where they're having a dinner party. And it felt like one of you wanted to keep them inside and one of you wanted to get them out.
You're exactly right, actually.
And they kept coming back. There would be a reason why we're going to have to go out. The sink is blocked. And then in the next chapter, no, we've cleared the sink. We can stay here.
She's decoded all our books, David.
I was going to say, not only do we know each other well, Jackie knows both of us well. So it's all fair.
So does one of you have an answer to that question? How do you balance your friendship?
You better flip a coin to see who goes first with this one. I mean,
it's funny because we don't actually, we live across the country from each other, and our lives are so different. So even though it might seem, we have a great rapport, but we don't actually spend a lot of time together. The time that we do spend together is like so kind of rare and precious that it's like, why squander it, And I also think we're both pretty low-key personalities relatively. We're not confrontational type of people. So I don't really think that comes up in our friendship much. It's just not the nature. Everybody's chemistry is different. If anything, that kind of stuff comes out in the writing, but between the two of us, I don't think so. David, refute or deny?
No, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, when we get together, like the conversation is probably 80% pizza and 20% other stuff. I mean, like, which is as it should be.
Yeah.
No, I think again, the way we set up Nick and Nora, like, again, we didn't know that we were doing a setup. We certainly didn't know we were setting a template for many, many books to come after, but it ended up being pretty brilliant for both of us, because I would say that the thing, both that we don't take things personally, but also I think the thing that I think saves us time and time again is we're in charge of our own chapters. There's not, at the end of the day, like, I have final say in my chapters, Rachel has final say in her chapters. We could suggest to the other person something that they might want to tweak or do, but in the end, we have the final decision in our chapters. And I think that actually makes it much, much, much easier, because, and I don't think we don't even attempt to try to change each other's chapters. I mean, as you said, Jackie, looking at Sam and Ilse, like if we had wanted it to be a smooth narrative, like, we would have had a conversation about, will they leave the building or not?
Yeah.
But instead it was like, no, this is, if I am keeping them in the building, if Rachel has them walk out. And again, what was very funny about that particular instance is Rachel very easily could have gotten them out of the apartment in the middle of one of her chapters, and I would have had nothing, I would not have been able to fight that. My chapter would have begun with them somewhere else, and I would have done that. But she was very, very gracious enough, knowing that I wanted to keep them in, that she would end her chapter with a reason for them to leave, as if to say, are you going to take this or are you not going to take this? And then when I was like, I'm not going to take this, that was fine. And so, but that was because it was acknowledging that this is a decision and I'm going to give it to you because I want to see what you're going to do. And we do that a lot, I think, where it's like, okay, if we think that something's major, I'm going to sort of bump it into your chapter and see what you do. And that will steady the pace.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that it really comes down to, this is why the one thing I've learned about collaboration and when it can work and why it works, and it's very simple, and it just comes down to trust. Like, we trust each other with these characters, and like, whatever you're going to do is what you're going to do, and what I'm going to do is what I'm going to do. And I often describe the end result as being, it's like we live in two different parts of the same house, and sometimes we get together in the kitchen to talk about things. But other than that, it's like I said, it's the same house, but we're on different sides of it.
We also very crucially share the same sense of humor, which I think,
yeah.
I mean, again, genuinely, I can't think of a single time when I haven't looked forward to reading one of Rachel's chapters when it has arrived, partially because I know that I will be laughing at some point. Mm-hmm. I think we would be really bad if we tried to do sort of an Ingmar Bergman, like, very dry, cold, detached analysis of adult lives and woe and misery and nihilism. Like we'd be like, no, that's not funny. I don't want to do that. I think we very much create situations primarily to crack each other up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I often tell David, like the one thing about him is that for whatever reason, he just gets my funny bone in a way that like nobody else does. And I remember one time repeating to somebody a joke that he had told me that just every time I would tell the story, I would just crack up laughing. And my friend was like, it's actually not that funny. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like the funniest thing I've ever heard, you know? So, I mean, I appreciate that a lot. I mean, it makes it never feels like work. My other books, my solo books, that feels like work. This with him does not feel like work.
Oh.
I'm just really laughing and having fun.
And I think that comes off the page for us too. You really sense the fun of it, and you're both hilarious, but you also both have different voices, I think. And then the problem often with books that are written from different characters' perspectives is that the voices sound too similar. So it works perfectly that you two are connected in this way, but with each chapter we get a whole new dimension and a whole new levels of complexity that maybe the other one hadn't imagined for that character. But and you also, sometimes it seems that you're setting each other really tricky challenges. So I think now especially when there's clues and secrets and dares and things like that, and that's in one chapter, and then the other person has to solve it. So sometimes do you get the chapter and think, I have no idea how I am supposed to resolve this issue that you have?
I'm going to say, I think you're giving us credit for a chess game. It's like we're strictly just playing checkers. What do you think, David?
You're probably just brighter than...
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever felt stumped. Like I definitely will get it. I will get a chapter and certainly will have the experience of going, oh, this isn't going the way that I thought it would. Mm-hmm. But again, like that, I think of that in the spirit of challenge, not in the spirit of like dreams thwarted. Like I genuinely, I mean, this many books in, I cannot recall a single time where I have gotten a chapter and thought, I don't know what I can do with this.
That's fantastic. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like school story starters, isn't it? Because that's what I find. I miss that kind of thing where at school someone would give you a project and then you can springboard from that. But with most books now, you just have to think it all up yourself. So you're doing that for each other.
I'm always grateful for every book that David starts for that exact reason.
Someone, I don't know how much more time you have, Rachel. Do you have time to ask? There looks like one more question here. Are you planning a spin-off series of books dedicated to other characters from Dash and Lily's story? And I love the other characters, all of them, Grandpa and Mrs. Basil-E. And I wanted to ask about whether you had, I've got so many questions, but I need to let you go probably, Rachel. Are you planning a spin-off series about the other characters?
Not, but we should. It's a great idea. I think and Sophia could definitely have their own set of books. And so could Mrs. Basil-E and Langston and Benny and yeah, why not?
Langston and Benny. Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's wonderful. Somebody says, I would like, if you could choose which next book you would like to be adapted. Someone says, personally, I'd love to see Tiny or Will Grayson on Netflix. I'd love to see all your books on Netflix. And I loved Every Day too. That's a wonderful movie.
Yeah, that would make a great series. Is anyone doing that?
No, I'm not right now, but who knows? Well, Rachel, you have a very easy answer to that question.
I am adapting one of my books called My Almost Flawless Tokyo Dream Life for
I love that book.
So I'm enjoying that, and that's actually been a great experience, and hoping to do more, and hoping, yeah, we'll see what happens, to develop other things, and hopefully our spin-off character books.
Right. Yeah, and for me, it's interesting. I mean, first of all, thank you, Angel, for the question, and I'm glad you're coming in from the Philippines. That's really cool. Yeah, no, I would love to see the Tiny Cooper musical, like Hold Me Closer, that I wrote. It would be great if someday, I wish I could write music. I can't, so I'm just waiting for somebody to write music for it. And honestly, I do, and again, keeping in mind that Rachel and I have been extraordinarily spoiled, the fact that we have had three adaptations, 2 movies and 1 TV series, and we've loved all 3 of them is like the best track record ever. But I will say, I would totally love Sam and Elsa to be filmed. Like, I think that is just, I think would be such a fun movie. I love movies that are in one place and like are different characters bouncing off of each other. And like, I think it is more than anything we've ever written. It's an ensemble piece. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be really fun to see. So if I were voting, I would actually go with Sam and Elsa. So if there are any Netflix producers watching,
we're available.
Now, I think we should let you go, but did you both of you have we've kept you for much too long. Thank you so much for answering everything so beautifully. It's so, I don't want to let you go because I'm so happy to see your faces.
I know, I was gonna say, it's so great to talk to you.
And David does a wonderful pitch also for the bookstore, or I could do it, but you have it perfected.
No, I mean, like, again, I want to urge everybody to support the bookstore. It's so amazing. I mean, again, we have both had amazing events at the store, and like, it has involved a lot of flying to get there. I won't lie. I mean, like, you've seen us at our jet lagged worst and maybe our jet lagged best. And so it is really amazing that we could do this from the comfort of our own homes. But definitely the way to support us and support events like this is to support the bookstore and buy as many books as you can, whether they're ours or others. At this time, it is so tough to be a bookstore, and we really, really appreciate all the support you can give. And again, I like the way that you guys have supported us from the very beginning. We greatly appreciate it.
It's entirely our pleasure, all the time, every time. So thank you. We appreciate you very much.
Oh, thank you.
One of my favorite places to go in Sydney.
Yay.
Before I have chocolate with Jackie.
I love Kino too. It's a wonderful bookstore, and I've just signed a pile of The Stolen Prince of Cloudburst at that store. So
come and get it.
Come and get that.
Jackie.
Mind the Gap is fantastic, and I love this tie-in edition. And then this, I've been rereading all of this, so I've just been in a world of Dash and Lily, and it's so wonderful, as I said, to see Rachel and David. So thank you so much to everybody who's been here and for the questions, and thank you so much to Alex, Rachel, David. I know I'm looking at you on the screen, but you don't know where.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, as always, and thank you so much, Jackie.
No
Again, apologies that I had the hour wrong, but I'm glad we were able to stay longer and do this.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jackie, for facilitating the conversation. See, I couldn't have done it. You did it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you.